Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority. Greetings and welcome to our latest Let's Talk Mental Health webinar. I'm Tom Castañeda, the System Director of Marketing and Public Relations for South Texas Health System. Thank you for joining us. Your mental health matters, so it's important to protect it by taking proactive steps to nurture your well-being. That includes prioritizing self-care, managing stress, building strong social connections, and seeking professional help when needed. So to help Rio Grande Valley residents prioritize their mental health, STHS Behavioral hosts these monthly Let's Talk Mental Health webinars. Through education on common mental health challenges and strategies to maintain good mental health, we hope to break the stigma surrounding mental health and encourage more people to open up about their own struggles and get professional help if necessary. Now, in this installment, we'll be discussing grief and loss. Typically a complex and painful process, grief is a natural response to a significant loss that challenges one's identity or life routines, like the passing of a loved one, the death of a pet, the end of a relationship, a chronic illness diagnosis, or losing financial stability due to a career loss. While the exact prevalence of grief in the United States is unclear, about 2.5 million Americans die annually per the National Institutes of Health, each leaving an average of 5 grieving people behind. So to help Rio Grande Valley residents understand the impact of grief on mental and physical health, we're joined by Bob Cooper, a licensed clinical social worker and the Director of Utilization Review with STHS Behavioral. Bob, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Tom, I'm glad to be here anytime.
Now, when we talk about grief, it is universal. Everyone at one point, at least one point in their life, will go through grief, right?
Yes, and oftentimes they don't realize that they're grieving because the loss isn't necessarily related to death.
And that could be, as we talked about, it could be losing a job or losing that financial stability. How important is it to make sure that you're resolving that grief, that you're working through it?
Sometimes it's a matter of recognizing it. One of the big deals that's going on right now is kids are going back to school. And you see a lot of adjustment issues when you change from elementary to middle to high school. And you may be grieving the status that you had and the friends that you lost when you change schools.
Yeah, that's something to definitely consider if you're a parent and you're looking out for your children's well-being and you're noticing that they're now from being the big fish in a little pond to being the little fish in a much bigger pond can
Absolutely.
Be challenging for them.
Absolutely. When I was a psychiatric social worker back in Kentucky, this was the big time for kids to be actually admitted for depression and suicidal thoughts, was the adjustment to the new school.
Now let's talk about grief in adults. You obviously practice privately as well as work at STHS Behavioral. Do people come and visit you regarding their grief? And if they do, is it early on or is it after it's sort of persisted?
Usually it's after it's persisted a little bit. I built actually quite a bit of my practice during the pandemic because I would see people in person. That was a big deal because people really want to discuss these problems face to face rather than telephonically or by video. And so I was seeing patients and a lot of them were affected by the pandemic and a lot of them profoundly. And one of the problems that drives people into counseling for their grief is that they compare their grief to that of other people. And the other people reciprocate that, and they say, well, why haven't you gotten over this, or can't you just move on? And it's really, really upsetting and frustrating.
And I think that's the challenging part, and we're going to discuss that later, and you have a great presentation for us. But it's also for the person that's going through the grief and making sure that you are understanding it and knowing that you're going through those stages of grief. But for the family members or your supportive friends, how to have those conversations, what to say, what not to say. It can be really hard to say the right things to the person at the right time.
And the problem is most of the time it feels like there is no right thing to say and I don't know what else I can say. And that's true of grief, and that's why you see a lot of people who don't do visitation in the funeral home or don't attend the funeral of people that they know very well because they're uncomfortable and I don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm. And you have a great presentation for us, so let's get started.
Okay. So, Tom stole my lead. Grief is universal. Everyone will grieve something sooner or later. Sometimes you know it because you've experienced a loss of somebody close to you, but a lot of the time you don't realize it because you're grieving some sort of change in who you are and how your life has been. As Tom mentioned, there are grief related to job changes. We talked about changes in school. Retirement, your children leaving home and having an empty nest. All of these different things can evoke feelings of grief. Grief is very personal. It's snowflakey. People don't grieve the same way. And that's part of the problem, is that we compare our experience to other people, and sometimes we see that other people are doing really well and seem to have recovered really quickly, and we're just not getting through things as easily, and we're not getting over it and feeling better and getting back to our old self. Well, there isn't really an old self. It doesn't exist anymore because something that has weight is gone from your life right now. And so, as we've talked about already, there are a lot of different things that cause grief. There is a growing industry right now in therapy for people who've lost pets. When I was very, very young, that wasn't a big deal. We didn't have those sort of emotional bonds, and there was kind of stigma over those kind of things. Kind of oddly, when you look at spectrums and continua of grief, I actually had somebody that I worked with several years ago who missed 2 days of work when the Harry Potter series was over. And it closed that chapter in her life, and it had been such a big deal to her. And she literally cried and had to go home from work. We get attached to things in ways sometimes that are very unusual, but are very strong, and we don't realize what's going on there. If you've lost a long-term coworker, Tom's about to lose one of his friends who's leaving the system and moving to another hospital in our system. And it's going to change things. So some people experience delayed grief. There's the old trope, that you and you feel shocked and you don't feel anything. And there are actually a lot of people that I've seen in counseling, and one of their main problems is, I don't feel like I can cry, and I haven't cried over my loved one. And sooner or later, though, it's going to come in there, and you don't necessarily know what that trigger is. You may just run across something that you had the experience with. If you played ball with your dad and everything else, you may be okay for a while, but then you go and play catch with somebody, and all of a sudden it reminds you of your dad and all of these feelings, and you become somewhat overwhelmed. Grief is also variable. We have vicarious grief, which was also a big deal during the pandemic. We had first responders and medical personnel who were overcome with this vicarious grief of all the patients that they lost. I remember I was living in Mission during the pandemic, and around the corner from me was a funeral home. And the streets were much quieter then. And this funeral home, one day, out of the blue, you just heard a humming noise, and a humming noise, and a humming noise. And so I walked up to the corner to see what it was. It was a refrigerated 18-wheeler that they had parked behind the funeral home to hold all of the people that they had lost. They couldn't take them all into the funeral home. And it was something that was, I had to walk past there to get to my practice. And it was something that was disconcerting. Every day you heard that humming and you knew what it was. It was a refrigerated truck. And then one day I went to the clinic, and it was quiet. It was silent, and it was a big change. And there were a lot of people that were truly overwhelmed with all of the things that they see. We probably see that going on in Kerrville with the search and rescue people from the flood. And we see that in all sorts of natural disasters. We see it in the military, where you are a witness and don't necessarily know the person or anything else. It's a form of trauma. There's also disenfranchised grief. And this was a huge deal back in the 70s and 80s. where before we had legalized gay marriage and thing, where a person would be hospitalized, and the hospital policy says, well, it's only family that can come in here. And so their partner really had no legal rights to get in there. And they grieved horribly, but because of the stigma at the time, people thought, who are you and what are you doing here? There's also that kind of get over it, where you can know somebody for a very brief period of time and not even know them very well, but it can hit you. And there are people around you that can be kind of callous and say, you didn't really know that person very well. Why is this upsetting you so much? And we see some of the same things about pets and things like that. And there's a lot of get over itness in our society around all sorts of mental health issues, but especially this kind. So grief is painful. Usually there's some sort of numbness, pain, sorrow, guilt, anger, especially if you're the survivor. If you're the immediate survivor, if you survive a trauma, why did I survive and the other person passed? And sometimes it goes away fairly quickly, and sometimes it lingers. As I said before, grief is very, very personal. It is very snowflakey, and no two people can go through it similarly. And sometimes the expectation is that you should follow some sort of pattern to your grief, and it just doesn't work that way. Complicated grief is a recent addition to the DSM-5 diagnosis. That's a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It was under study for a long time, but they recently added it. And it's a look at how long is too long to be grieving, and that sometimes maybe you've been grieving too long and the symptoms are a bit more intense than the norm. Now the problem, the good thing about this is that people can get help for it now. Generally when you go to seek help, somebody has to provide a diagnosis, and now this diagnosis exists. So it's billable. But the bad thing about it is that now all of a sudden we're looking at, is your grief truly complicated? What does that kind of continuum look like? And you're sort of pigeonholing people into whether or not their grief is complicated or whether it's just really they're not getting over things. Grief is generally lonely. As I said, there are a lot of people that don't go to funeral homes, they don't go to funerals, and they don't follow up with the people who are grieving because they just don't know what the right thing to say is. Beyond, I'm sorry for your loss, what is the best thing that you can say? I'm sorry for your loss. I'm here for you if you need me, but there's not much else. Anything else, risks making things worse. And sometimes, we fumble for our words and we just feel completely lost. We feel helpless to help to assist the person who's grieving. And that's a horrible way to feel, and we try to avoid helplessness at all costs. And so rather than be supportive, sometimes we just kind of disengage as well. And sometimes when you don't have close family, at the end of the night, you're there alone, and the person you've lost is gone, and you don't really know what to do or how to act. I've been there before, and it's a struggle. It truly is, and sometimes you just have to go to sleep and start over the next day. So prolonged grief disorder is basically based on time. How long has it last? As I said, it's a new diagnosis, and there are with any other diagnosis there are specific criteria. The person with prolonged grief generally loses their identity somewhat. In my own case, I didn't struggle with prolonged grief, but for 19 years, I was Judy's husband, more than anybody else in the whole world. And then she was gone. And so who am I now? And that took a while to understand who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act, because I was always Judy's husband. And there's a trick to this. It's a question that I ask in an assessment when somebody comes to my office for the first time, regardless of their problem. And it throws most people. And the question is very simple. Who are you? And a lot of people look at me with kind of a blank expression because they're waiting for the trick or the trap, or there's got to be more to it. But that's the question, who are you? And there are right or wrong answers to this question. And that throws them even more, that there's possibly wrong answers. I had to interview social workers once, and I asked 8 of them in an interview, who are you? And not one of them got the question correct. You know who I am, Tom?
Who are you?
I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Far and away. That's number 1. It's actually number 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you get down there. I'm a Lucha Libre fan. That's number 2, right? Somewhere down the road, I'm a husband and I'm a brother. I'm no longer a son or a grandson, but I used to be. Any word that's a noun that's true is correct. Those social workers said, well, I went to UTRGV. No, that's what you did, not who you are. And hopefully when you answer that question, you answer in a social context. But the question is about, how do you see yourself? And when you are somewhat broken at the beginning of grief, you really don't know the answer to that, because there was somebody else that you defined yourself as. Like I said, I was Judy's husband. And now all of a sudden, I'm not. And you got to adjust to that. A person with prolonged grief, often disbelief about the loss, about the death. And I went to a training one time back in Kentucky by a funeral director. And in Southern culture, I don't know about Texas culture, but in Southern culture, it's very important to have a viewing, a visitation, same thing. Because it's very important for some people to see the body, to know that the person is dead. And there are cases when somebody disappears, when somebody's lost in a catastrophe, when a person is missing in action, or just when a person walks away and you don't know what happened to them. There's always this kind of sense of disbelief that maybe one day they'll come back. And that can be really, really traumatic to some people, because they're still waiting for somebody who's no longer with us. There's difficulty reintegrating into your social circles. Some of that is because people avoid you, but you're also avoiding people. You don't know how to act, and you don't know what to say to them and anything else. And when you've been around with a lot of couples, now all of a sudden you're alone, and you're the fifth wheel. There's emotional numbness, and it's very difficult to escape your loneliness. I remember there was a cultural sense of this when I was a small child. I went to a Catholic school, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, we went to Mass. And there was us, 8 grades of school on one side of the church. And on the left, generally, there was about 8 women, all dressed in black with veils. Some of them had been widowed for many, many years, but they had taken on that role, that identity, and that's who they were. And they weren't going to be, a girlfriend or a wife or anything else anymore. They were the ladies in black. You used to see that all the time. So about 7 to 10% of adults will have prolonged grief, 5 to 10% of kids. It's worse. Your risk for it is when it's a traumatic loss. You weren't prepared for it or anything else. And it's worse if you have a mood disorder. If you are prone to depressive symptoms, that grief in tandem with your tendency for depression can make it worse. Oops. Okay, so as I said before, the question about grief is, how long is too long? And so for the American Psychiatric Association, they say about 12 months for an adult, about 6 months for a kid. Kids are much more resilient and can get over those things much better. They also have a very interactive life. They have a lot of things that they have to be doing. They have to go to school. And as such, a lot of them, are with their friends a whole lot. They are into extracurricular activities. They're playing sports or doing things like that. And so they're reintegrated much better than the adult who can literally sit at home alone and not do much of anything. But in grief, you always have to consider what's the impairment. What is it keeping me from doing? What is it making me less capable of? I had this lady that came to see me many years ago, and she got up from the living room, sitting with her husband watching television. She went into the kitchen to get him a beer. Sounds like a trope, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. She walked back out of the kitchen and he was dead. He'd had a massive heart attack in that little amount of time. And she was crying and crying and crying, obviously. And her friend brought her in to see me at a community mental health center. And what a lot of people didn't realize about her, besides the fact that her whole identity was wrapped up in her husband, was that he had paid all the bills. He had taken care of everything at the house. When he died, she didn't even know where the checkbook was. And so she sat in my office and she cried for about an hour, and I got very little out of her. But we just did a little bit of brief stuff about we're just going to do the next thing and nothing else. And so she came back to see me in a few days. And I, what have you done? And she said, well, I paid the water bill. Yes! You see, you're capable. Because in this intense grief, you really don't feel like you're going to move forward. You feel like you're trapped. And you can't see, now what? I don't know. You lock up. You freeze. And so just a little thing, I was able to actually write a check and get it to a water company and pay a bill, is just a little crack, a little opening into that. I can live. I can take care of myself. And after a couple more sessions, she was done. She was still grieving, but it wasn't as problematic and intense as it was in the beginning. So treatment for grief, generally it's individual or group therapy. There are support groups that can be really helpful, and they generally don't cost anything. The best support groups, generally you're going to find them through a funeral home that has social outreach, or through a hospice program. Some of the hospice programs will have ongoing services even after the patient is gone, and they can help you get through and adjust to that kind of thing. Hospice is a service that we don't use enough. My late wife was a hospice social worker, then she was a hospice patient. She prepared me really well for her leaving, and we had time for that. Sometimes you just don't have the time, but hospice is a great service. We need to use it more often. We need to ask for referrals from it when we find out that we're getting short time. It's generally for people who have 6 months or less to live. And so, but it's a fantastic service and provides a lot of support. So when you're trying to resolve your grief, the first thing, as always with anything else in your life, is to make good choices. You choose what's best for you. Don't let other people kind of steer you into doing things that you're not comfortable doing right now. I've worked with people before where their siblings or their friends try and get them dating too fast. Let's get on the dating app. If it's not time, choose not to. You have to make the best choices for you. That is really our goal as human beings. Half of our life is trying to make better choices. And so you have to choose what's best for you. The second, you have to connect with people who are supportive, and you have to let go, at least for a time, of the people who aren't. One of the first patients that I saw here in the Valley in my practice had lost his wife to COVID. They'd been married almost 50 years. They took her to the emergency room and they admitted her, and he never saw her alive again. He was not allowed to visit. They put her on a vent in 2 days. She was gone in 4. And that was super traumatic, because not only have I lost my rock, my reason for living, but I didn't get to say goodbye. And he was really, really torn up about this. And after 9 months or so is when I saw him. And it was like, everybody's telling me I need to move on and get over it. No, you don't. You need to grieve in your own way. And so it didn't take very long to actually get him discharged from treatment. He needed somebody to listen to him, somebody that wasn't going to tell him to get over it. And then he needed to just start doing some little things to move forward with the life that he had before. Nice guy. And the last thing is communicate your needs to others. This is one of the most important things that we have to do. We have to ask ourselves all the time, what do I need? And then sometimes when we can't meet it ourselves, we have to ask other people, can you help me? It's really, really difficult. And especially if you have some people around you that aren't prone to helping or that are going to judge your need. But we really do have to reach out, and we have to connect with people who will support us. Now, this ties back into choice. If you're asking the wrong people for help, part of that is your issue. You need to ask the right people, the people who have time to listen to you, have time to help you, and the people that aren't going to judge you, and the people that want you to get better and wish only the best for you. If you're asking somebody else, you're barking up the wrong tree. You need to look at your own choice there. Okay. Don'ts of grieving. Don't drink over it. It doesn't help. It doesn't help, and it can descend into a problem. So AOD on this slide is alcohol and other drugs. They are not ways to cope. Don't avoid the pain, but also you can't think that the past was wonderful. I've worked with people before who were trauma victims who lost their husband who had abused them horribly. And part of their issue was they believed their husband was the greatest thing since sliced bread, only because he had died and they couldn't think ill of the dead. You have to be realistic about what your life was in order to look for the new life going forward and what's possible. So when you have a good day, don't feel guilty about it. A good day is a good day. Happiness comes and goes, and when you have it, you got to roll around in it and enjoy it. It's not going to last. It's an emotion. But don't feel guilty about it. Don't withdraw from other people. Accept help sometimes. There's a lot of times we don't want to take help from other people. We want to take care of ourselves. And sometimes accepting help is difficult. And don't neglect your other survivors. I did have a patient one time who was so traumatized by the loss of her son that she neglected her other two children and kind of pushed them away because she really could not, to herself, overcome her grief. She said, I can't. And so she actually alienated her two surviving children. So be careful about that. Live the best life that you can. And the best way that you can honor the person that you've lost is to live well. I can't speak sometimes to what people do after the death, because some of it has to do with your beliefs and your faith. Sometimes I still want to call my mom. She's been gone for 8 years. It's just kind of a reflex thing. Something happens at work that's a little odd, a little quirky. Hey, mom would enjoy that, but mom's gone, you know. But I can still talk to her. I knew my mom for 51 years. I know what she would say back to me, and it's okay to have that conversation. I lost my dad very young, but it wasn't very long after that I stopped going to the cemetery, because in my faith, he's not there. He's in a different place. So you need to take care of yourself. It's okay to talk to them. It's okay to write to them or write about them. It's okay to talk to others about it. One of the things that we can do very briefly if we have a cohesive family is we can tell stories. And one of the best things that you can do is record them and save them somewhere. I gave Judy that idea for her hospice patients because my father died when I was 13 and I can't hear his voice. I don't remember what he sounded like. My mother died about 8 or 9 years ago. I can hear her a little bit, but not much. I have recordings of Judy. I know what she sounded like and everything else. And I have recordings now of my surviving brothers and sisters that we have saved in a cloud. so that sometime down the road, when we're one less, we can hear stories as told from about our life from their perspective, and we can remember them just through their voice and their stories. And your voice is a very powerful thing. Consider something like that, even if you're not preparing for somebody to die. This year, when you have a family gathering, give somebody the cell phone, turn on the recording app and say, "Tell me a story." I'll listen. The funny thing is that oftentimes you'll get different versions of the same story. My little brother did that. Gosh, it drives me crazy. I had to tell the story over again to correct him. So honor the person that you've lost. Thank you so much, Tom.
That is all very enlightening information, and I appreciate the 3 C's, the choose, connect, and communicate. I think that's really important. So let's talk a little bit about the most common sources of grief, because as we've talked about, bereavement is obviously one of the most popular ones, but the death of a pet, people just love their pets like their family members, divorce or a relationship breakup, loss of health, getting that diagnosis that you have cancer and maybe it's a stage 4 or whatever that may be. That is also some grief that you're going to deal with. Losing a job or financial stability is also really tough. A miscarriage, retirement, which I really didn't think about, but you are so used to a life for 25, 30, 40 years, and then all of a sudden that is no more, and you have to figure out what you're going to do.
Right, and it's something that's very different from my current wife's culture and mine. Where I came from in Kentucky, the first question that you ask somebody is, "What do you do?" When I got married, a lot of people from Mexico City came up for the wedding and everything else. And in 4 hours' time, not one person asked me what I did for a living. It was very, very different. But, you know, when you retire, you lose a part of who you are, what you do, and your routine every day. And it's very disconcerting. Some people adjust to it okay, but most people have at least some problems with it. My brother has retired twice now, and he still looks for things to do for work because that's part of who he was.
Yeah, I think my mom had a business with my father for many years. When she had to shut it down, I think that grief really impacted her because that was their identity. And it was also, she lost my father, so the grief of that and trying to maintain something that was theirs for a long time, to have to let that go. So that grief was really heavy. So
absolutely.
So another one is loss of a cherished dream, which I don't think you think about. You think about like, oh, I want to do this when I grow up, or whatever your dream may be. That losing that dream is also a source of grief.
Right. I had somebody that came to see me that had studied, and was 1 credit short of a degree at UTRGV, and had decided, I am 1 credit short of a degree and I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And had put all of this time, effort, and energy into a career that they've decided I don't want, and I don't know what to do now. Awful. Yeah. That
can be very complicating. Now let's talk a little bit about anticipatory grief. So you know, you and your wife, in your situation with your wife, you knew you were anticipating what was next. And so how do you deal with that in the moment when you know that the end is near, so to speak?
I had a very different experience with Judy.
Okay.
Judy had she had an incurable lung disease.
Okay.
Hospice is generally for 6 months or less. She lasted over 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she would have her ups and downs and everything else, which in a way was difficult on her family, because they were prepared for her to go, and then she didn't go, and she lived and she lived and she lived. So as I said, Judy was a hospice social worker, and so we had everything lined out as far as what's next. She had, at different stages of her time in hospice, had picked out different next wives for me and everything. But we had all of our advanced directives and everything. All of those things were lined out. And so what you have to do during this period, and I've got a couple of clients right now that are going through this, is you have to absolutely focus on right now, today. And we have to do what we can while we can. Because once the dying process gets to a certain point, you can't anymore, and you're kind of at home. And so you have to take advantage and strike while the iron's hot as far as what you can do.
Now, we hear about abbreviated grief, and you talked a little bit about it, that some people, and it happens a lot with anticipatory grief. You've gone through it, so you knew that it was coming. So is it, and as we talked about, it's like a snowflake. No one grieves the same. So you shouldn't feel guilty if you have abbreviated grief because you had that anticipatory grief before. Or
no, your grief is your grief. It is what it is. And so the problems come about when we try and make other people grieve like we do. And so you need to do this or you need to do that. And the worst thing you can say to anybody is you need to get over this, you need to move on. It turns them off to you completely. And so I was very lucky during that time. You know, it was a lot of anticipation and everything else, and it was a lot of struggle, but it made the actual grief process much more palatable.
Do you think that the average person knows how to process or recognize grief?
I don't think they recognize grief from sources other than death. And it depends on who passes. I think if it's somebody close to you, no, you don't know how to process it because generally you're not ready for it. And even if you have had some sort of preparation, you're still not ready for it. I've worked with people who had somebody that was terminally ill for quite a while, and they're like, I'm ready to go. And then they pass, and all of this preparation, they fall into shambles. No, grief is not something that you can prepare for too much because you really don't know how you're going to handle it.
Now, grief in the Latino culture, obviously we are predominantly Hispanic here in the Rio Grande Valley. You've been here for several years now. Do you notice the differences, especially because we have familismo, right? So we're all about family. We're a very spiritual culture. And then we even have Day of the Dead. We have the novenas that we do at funerals, things like that. What difference do you notice since moving here when it comes to grief in the Latino culture?
You know, the clients that I have seen for grief, most of them have been Latino, and some of the immediate things are very helpful, where the family gets together, where they have the rosaries and then the novenas and all these other things. That's very, very supportive. But as we become more spread out as a people, that cultural touchstone is not as strong, I don't think, as it used to be, because everybody else has to leave. And then you're confronted with that, I'm alone now. And that's where the struggle comes in. And then in the first year, you have this is the first Thanksgiving without them, the first Christmas, the first birthday. And that first year, all of those firsts can be a real struggle.
And so it sort of repeats, and then you get to the 5-year or a 10-year. So it's just something that will constantly cycle through.
Right.
When it comes to that grief.
And you have the two misas, the one on the birthday and the one on the death day. And so there's a lot of ritual about it, but which can be very supportive, but it really depends on your family.
Now, subtle losses can trigger grief, right? Such as moving away from home for the first time. There's a lot of parents who are going to see their kids off to college. And so you have to pay attention to yourself, but also to your child, because that could cause some grief.
Right. And one of the things that we really have to realize is that a lot of people who seek help are not ill. They're not ill at all. They're going through what's called a phase of life problem. My life has changed profoundly for one reason or another, and I'm having a little bit of a problem adjusting to it. And so if we can see that as I'm not weak, it's just that everything has changed so much. The retirement and everything else. They're basically phase of life problems is how they're defined. And it's not that I'm not capable, it's that, wow, the change has been so dramatic. I'm not sure what to do next.
I will tell you, I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley, and I opted to go to school in Michigan, at Michigan State. And I remember going there and thinking, oh, I'm not going to go home for Thanksgiving because I'm going to go home for Christmas. So it was the first Thanksgiving, which is a holiday that's near and dear to my entire family. And that was the first one. And I remember the grief of that wrong decision to not come home for Thanksgiving. So it can definitely be impactful, and it's something that your child may not think about, but maybe you should think about, like, hey, if I can afford to bring you home or get you down here, it might be a good thing.
Well, I visited Michigan State one time. It was very cold. It was not the prettiest buildings in the whole world. It was a lot of concrete. Plus, they empty the dorms at Thanksgiving, and so a lot of the people that would be around you to support you are gone. They've gone home.
It was empty. Like there were only like maybe 2 or 3 students in the whole building. So making sure that you're aware of that, those little moments where you can have that connection, and making sure. The good thing is now you have FaceTime and things like that. At the time, we just had the phone to call. Now let's talk about the 5 stages of grief that we all hear about, and I think it's important to sort of recognize them. Oh, you're covering your eyes because you're like, ah. So denial isn't just a river.
Let's go back before we do that.
Okay.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with the 5 stages of grief.
Okay.
They were not about people dying.
Okay.
They were adapted into that.
Okay.
Her research was about people who had received a terminal diagnosis, not about people who had actually passed. And they've kind of been adapted that way. But what happens is when you put people into a stage setting, they can often feel like, I'm not progressing fast enough. And to be honest, you go back and forth between these different stages. And so it can be disconcerting for some people, and it can make them think like, I'm not grieving in the right way, or I'm not progressing fast enough. But you got 5 stages.
But recognizing, because, and that's the thing, is you may have one, you may only have one, or you may go through all of them, but it's good to kind of know that there are different ways to grieve, right?
Right, and so denial is the first one. And denial is one of the most basic defense mechanisms that people have.
Yeah.
In any situation.
Yeah.
You say, hey, I want $1 million. No!
Yeah.
Same kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
We say no right off the bat, and that's truly what denial is. You really cannot believe in the moment that somebody is gone, especially when there's a trauma. Car accident, something like that. It's hard to believe, and that can last for a little while. Okay, the second one is anger. Because I've lost somebody that I really cared about, that why my person, it's not fair. And so you get really angry about the emptiness that you feel. Okay. Then there's bargaining, and you get into this pipe dream, and it's a dangerous place to be. If I could only see them one more time. If I can only see them for an hour. If I can only...
Yeah.
It's a dangerous place to be because their real initial death nearly broke you. Imagine you could have them for an hour again and then lost them a second time.
Yeah.
You're not going to survive that. So bargaining is third. Depression is fourth, when you really start to feel the reality of the loss and everything else. And then finally you break through and you get into acceptance. Okay. There's a man named Worden that actually did things on mourning, that was more focused on that. And he has the 4 tasks of mourning. I don't know them off the top of my head, but the first one is accepting that the person is indeed gone.
All right, let's talk about the emotional symptoms of grief. So you're going to have shock and disbelief, sadness, guilt is a really big one that a lot of people experience, fear and anger. So those are sort of the range of emotions that you may feel.
Right, and there's also some, with some people, as I mentioned before, especially during a trauma, why did I survive and the other person did? So that's where some of the guilt comes from. There's a lot of guilt, especially for children, when they lose somebody, because children have a hard time accepting that somebody is going to die, that you didn't do or say something before the person passed. I forgot to tell them this. we went to school that day and I didn't tell them I loved them before I left. And so there's all of these kind of residual things that can really tear at your insides.
Now, there are also physical symptoms of grief. So you may have fatigue, nausea, lowered immunity, weight loss, or weight gain. So be paying attention to the physical aspects as well.
You know, it used to be in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders that grief and depression were differential diagnoses for each other. They look very much the same thing. And so, yeah, you can have either eating too much, not eating at all, sleeping too much, not sleeping at all. And like, as you mentioned, the fatigue and everything else. The person who is grieving can look like they're depressed.
And then behavioral changes, obviously, that somebody may experience, that confusion, trouble thinking or making decisions, feeling as if you've lost a sense of hope or direction, difficulty focusing on anything other than your loss, and difficulty remembering or keeping track of your responsibilities. So you will notice some behavior changes in your loved ones.
And a lot more irritability as well, because you don't understand what I'm going through. You don't get it. You don't know. And so there's a lot of those kind of things where they can actually push people away, and you kind of have to be tender with them and kind of re-engage.
All right. Let's dispel some myths when it comes to grief and grieving. The pain will go away faster if you ignore it.
No. You have to embrace the pain, because you have to realize what you're going through, and you have to realize that I'm suffering. When you say I'm not, you're not addressing the problem.
It's important to be strong in the face of loss.
This is what gets people in a lot of trouble, because you can, you know, it's kind of like if you go to the swimming pool and you take a beach ball and you hold it underwater and you hold it and you hold it and you let go and it pops up into the air. This is the same thing true with your feelings and your emotions. If you are really trying to push them down, sooner or later, your psychic energy is just going to run out a little bit, and it's going to leak out everywhere. So no, you need to talk about what's going on.
If you don't cry, it means you aren't sorry about the loss.
No, if you don't cry, it means that you're numb about the loss. Your tears will come sooner or later. And the other side of that is that, you know, sometimes people think we cry too much. And we cry because it's evolutionarily important. We still have tear ducts. There are other parts of our body that we don't have. And it is one of the greatest sources of just short-term emotional relief, is to just cry.
Sometimes a good cry goes a long way. I will go into a movie knowing that it's, or listen to a song knowing that it will invoke tears, and just allow myself to cry when I feel like I haven't necessarily done that just yet.
And I've had people that came in the office that are really, really trying to hold it. And I tell them, look, just let go. Wail if you need to. That's okay. You know, and I've always got plenty of Kleenex handy, because everybody cries at the beginning, and that's okay. It's relief.
And the last myth, grieving should last about a year.
Grieving on its own will last at least a year, because as I said before, you're going through the first this, the first that, without this person. And then you get to about a year, and then you say, oh, it's been a year now. And then, as you said, it's been 5 years, and oh, it's been 10 years. It's going to come and go. Every once in a while, you may have a flare-up and everything else. That's okay, because you're living a life that you didn't have before. I'm just not used to that.
One of the most important things I think to remember is that grieving happens gradually. It can't be rushed. You can't rush through it. You can't hurry it. You have to just let it run its course, right?
Absolutely. You know, in that way, it can sound like it's kind of like a virus, but you have to find your own way to grieve. And you don't know beforehand what the impact is going to be. And so you're playing it by ear as it feels. And it makes it really difficult. It really does. And it makes it difficult for the other people around you, because they're grieving in a different way.
All right, let's talk a little bit about dealing with the grieving process. So here are some tips that are recommended. Acknowledge your pain.
Yes.
You have to acknowledge and accept it. Accept that grief can trigger many different and unexpected emotions.
Yes.
Like you could have a whole range of them in one day.
And you can have them you can go days without any kind of problem, and then something just triggers you, whatever, and then There are a lot of people that will develop anxiety as an outcropping of their loss, because what happens, especially with children, you know, if you lose your father, what happens if mommy dies? What happens if, you know, and so all of a sudden they see this potential for other things that they didn't recognize before.
I understand that your grieving process will be unique to you.
Yes.
No two grievers are alike.
No, and in a way, you have to approach it kind of like they do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can only tell you what worked for me. I'm not sure what's going to work for you. And so you can give suggestions, but you can't really pigeonhole people and say, this is what you need to do. You just have to see. It's trial and error.
Seek out face-to-face support from people who care about you.
Yes.
And I think it's the face-to-face is really important, because it's that human connection that we need. It's great to have a FaceTime or a phone conversation, but being in a room with someone and that's supportive and encouraging makes a big difference.
And like depression, your house is your enemy. You need to be out. Otherwise, you'll start to ruminate too much, and you can start sliding into a depressive episode. You can start sliding into just alienation, and you need other people to help you get through this. You need to start establishing your life outside of your home. Regardless of who you are, our life is not at our job, no matter how much it feels that way. But our life isn't at our home either. Our life is out in the world. Think of all of the things that we do and the time that we go in between those things. Our life's out in the world, and that's where we learn and do new things, and that's what's going to make us more positive.
All right. Support yourself emotionally by taking care of yourself physically. I think that's one of the things that we forget to eat. Some people will not shower. Let's say they'll go a few days, but taking care of yourself physically is really important for your health.
Right, and this can be difficult when you lose a partner, and your partner was the one who cooked and took care of the house and things like that. Now all of a sudden, you're eating McDonald's every day, if you eat every day. And you know, the laundry's piling up and everything else, and you really just don't know how to adjust to this different thing without that division of labor. It's very disillusioning.
And the last one, recognize the difference between grief and depression.
Yes. I have a real pet peeve about people who say they're depressed. There's a big difference between feeling depressed and being depressed. If you feel depressed, you will generally get over that. If you are depressed, you need treatment and you need help. They're not the same thing. When you are grieving, you feel depressed. But when those impairments start sneaking in, when you're missing work, or you're not engaging with other people, you're not leaving the house, and you're having the sleep and appetite disturbances, now you need to start investigate, is this part of my grief, or am I starting to be depressed?
All right. And now let's talk about supporting a loved one who is grieving. So it's important to be present.
Yes.
To just be present, be there.
And it's important to listen. And too many times when we find somebody and we actually ask for help, the person will try and fix things. And that's not what we need. We need the person to listen to us and just sit there and be with us and let us talk and talk and talk. You don't necessarily need the Band-Aid right now. And that's where it comes into the person who's grieving needs to ask for what they need, and sometimes they just need an ear. And other time, if you need something instrumental, then you say, here's what I need, can you help me solve this problem? They're not always the same thing, and so being present and just listening is really important. And sometimes you just need to sit there in silence.
Don't minimize someone's loss. And I think that sometimes, as you had mentioned before, we're just like, get over it, is something that sometimes people say, but since no grief is individualized, you never know when, somebody needs to get over it longer than another person does. And
this happens quite a bit with pets as well. When somebody comes home to their dog is a constant, and the dog is always the dog. It's, not like, my boyfriend who I fight with and all these other things, and, we're on again, off again. That dog's there every day, and that dog has been a constant in their life. That kind of a thing can really throw a person for a loop.
So what advice do you have for parents who, to help their children through the grieving process? Because children are definitely in a different headspace than adults, obviously. So what's your best advice for parents when it comes to grief in kids?
They need to consult somebody who knows more about children's grief. And they need to look for these kind of problems where their behavior starts to be a little bit uncontrollable and there's a personality change and stuff like that, which is very, very common, but you may need some short-term brief therapy for that kind of a thing. It's difficult. You can't talk to a child the way you can talk to an adult, and it's very, very difficult to try and, when you are hurting yourself, try and bring yourself down to their level and speak in a language that they can understand. And one of the things that's always difficult, regardless of anything else, is that to tell them that everything's going to be okay. And that's just not true. That's not a promise you can make. And so that's one of the dangerous things that you can get in there. And so you try and talk to them about getting their feelings out and expressing what they need. Okay.
And when it comes to treatment for grief, especially if it starts leading into depression, things like that, what types of treatment is available for somebody who may be going through that grieving process?
Most of the time it's individual therapy. And your first call, always, your insurance company, because if they're in your network, that's going to lower your cost and everything else. There are support groups, like I said, at funeral homes and some of the hospice agencies. There's a lot of online, you can go to chat rooms and things like that if that's what you need. If you are a person of faith, you can talk to your pastor about it, or a pastor about it. There's a lot of pastoral counseling available there. It kind of depends on what you need. As I've said with every other kind of mental health issue, if you think you need help, seek out a professional, and then you can just have an assessment and see maybe what I need next.
And there are a lot of people who aren't very open to having conversation, but there are other ways that you can get treatment through creative arts. I know that art therapy. So if you're a person of few words who doesn't really like to open up, what do you recommend that somebody like that do?
I send a lot of people to this park in Mission because there's not a whole lot of people there, and it has a circular walking track. And I say, I want you to take at least one lap, and I want you to talk to your father or whoever out loud. Talk to them. And just see what comes out. And just let it go where it will. Because you know what they would think and what they would say and everything else. And so you just have that chat. Sometimes, like as I said before, you can record a story about somebody. It's really important to remember some of the really good things that happened. It's also important to remember some of the things you've survived in the past. The way that my family grieved over my mother helped us quite a bit when I lost my brother and then when I lost my sister. And so we had those kind of shared experiences that we could fall back on.
All right, and the final piece of advice that you would want to tell anyone who is going through the grieving process at the moment?
Ask for what you need. It is the most important piece of advice that I have for anybody in any situation. Ask for what you need. And if you don't know in the immediate what you need, think about it just for a moment. And let everything else go and just ask yourself, what do I need right now? And then find the right person to ask for it.
And be patient with yourself and give yourself grace.
Yes. Absolutely.
Grace, we don't give ourselves enough grace, I don't think.
No, we don't. Absolutely not. Our inner critic is way too loud.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bob. We really appreciate this information.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.
And that officially concludes our webinar. We thank you for joining us. We hope you'll continue to prioritize your mental health and the mental health of your loved ones. If you are experiencing mental health challenges, STHS Behavioral can help. The facility has served the South Texas community for more than 30 years, offering inpatient and outpatient treatment options. If you or a loved one is experiencing a mental health issue, you can schedule a confidential assessment by calling the hotline at 388-1300. Please remember, you are not alone. Speak with a loved one or seek professional help if you need emotional or mental health support. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, it's important to call the National Suicide and Crisis Line at 988. Licensed counselors are available to speak with you in English and Spanish 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, don't miss our next installment of this Let's Talk Mental Health series on Thursday, September 5th, broadcast live at 5:30 p.m. via Facebook as we discuss suicide prevention. We hope you can join us. And to watch our previous Let's Talk Mental Health seminars, all you have to do is visit sthsletstalk.com. Until our next seminar, stay healthy, stay safe, and please continue to prioritize your mental well-being. Sometimes life's burdens can take their toll on your emotional well-being. If you or a loved one is struggling, know that you are not alone. South Texas Health System Behavioral can help you cope with depression, manage feelings of anxiety, regain control of mood swings, and recover from substance use disorders. Our staff is available 24/7, offering the quality and compassionate inpatient and outpatient care you need to overcome life's challenges. South Texas Health System Behavioral, where your mental health is our priority.